Hey everybody, it is Thursday, August 28th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu. As many of you get this Labor Day weekend started early.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, a lot of numbers are out as so many Americans are traveling starting today, may have already been traveling. Earlier this week, the TSA expecting to screen just over 17 million people starting today through early next week, and about 3 million passengers alone set to travel tomorrow. So beware if you're headed to the airport. As they say, Jill,
pack your patience.
Your patience.
And good news if you are driving to your Labor Day destination, gas prices are projected to be about $3.15 a gallon on Labor Day, which is actually the lowest that they have been since 2020 and about 14 cents cheaper per gallon than last year.
Yeah, the good news this year, well, you don't always feel it, is domestic round-trip flights are 6% down from last year. Hotel rates are 11% lower than last year. And car rental prices are down 3% over last year. So something to keep in mind, while some things are getting more expensive, it appears travel slightly cheaper this year. So hope all of you have an easy time. It is false fall. And in a lot of the country, fake fall, false fall, as in it'll get warmer again in early September. You're going to have like a slight preview of fall. Jill's favorite season, as it is for many of you, except in the South, still going to be pretty steamy and rainy for most of the weekend. So sorry for those of you, especially on the Gulf Coast.
By the way, if you are traveling by car this weekend, according to AAA, the best time to leave would be today before 1 p.m.
Get moving now.
Start packing. Or tomorrow before noon, or Saturday from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., or Sunday before 11 a.m., or Monday before noon. Kind of obvious here. There's nothing that you're like, oh my goodness. I get the
trend line. If you are an early bird, you will get the worm and not have to deal with as much traffic this weekend.
Okay, let's get to the headlines, though. Starting with that tragic Minnesota school shooting. 2 kids are dead. 17 others are injured.
What we're learning about the shooter, the victims, the manifesto. There's a lot here, Jill, and it is certain to get very political in the coming days.
A new lawsuit against OpenAI from the parents of a teenager who took his own life. What they're saying, the AI chatbot told their son before he died by suicide. To politics, the new CDC director being ousted just weeks into the job. What we know about it?
Yeah, like literally 2 weeks into the job. What we know about the fights that may have led to this.
And the F.D.A. approves new COVID shots for fall, but there are some restrictions. As the school year gets underway, South Korea banning phones in classrooms nationwide. Which other countries have done the same? And it comes as Americans are spending less time reading for fun and more time on screens. But it turns out there are a few genres of books that are seeing a lot of interest. We'll tell you which ones. And Moshe is on this day in history.
A pinnacle moment in the civil rights movement on this day in 1963.
All right, another school year has begun, and unfortunately, with it, a horrific school shooting, this time in Minneapolis at the Annunciation Catholic School at around 8:30 a.m. local time. A shooter opened fire from outside of the church through a window during morning mass. 2 children, ages 8 and 10, were murdered. Police say they were sitting at the pews at Mass when they were shot. 17 other people were injured, including 14 kids and 3 adults who were in their 80s. As of this recording, 2 of the victims are in critical condition, but all of the wounded and injured in the hospital are expected to survive. The shooter eventually turned the gun on herself. Here is a 10-year-old boy named Weston who described what happened. He said he was sitting just 2 seats away from the stained glass windows from where the shooter was firing, so close that he actually got gunpowder on his skin.
The first one, I was like, what is that? I thought it was just something. Then when I heard it again, I just ran under the pew. And then I covered my head. My friend Victor, saved me, though, because he laid on top of me, but he got hit.
Your friend laid on top of you?
Yeah, and he got hit.
So Weston said that his friend is going to be okay. He said the school has done mass shooting drills before, but they've always been in the classroom. They've never actually conducted one in the church. Moshe, the principal of the school, also describing a scene in which teachers and older children jumped on top of younger kids to shield them from bullets.
Within seconds of this situation beginning, our teachers were heroes. Children were ducked down. Adults were protecting children. Older children were protecting younger children. And as we heard earlier, it could have been significantly worse without their heroic action.
As of this recording, we do not know the identities of the two children who were killed. But what are we learning about the shooter?
There's a lot here and more to come here in the coming days. The police ID'd the shooter as 23-year-old Robin Westman. She was armed with a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol, all purchased legally. She also used a smoke bomb and put barricades on the doors, presumably so that people couldn't flee, as she was shooting through the windows there from the outside. Police are investigating a very disturbing manifesto and a YouTube video showing weapons marked with phrases like, "for the children, ha ha ha," along with a sketch of the church interior. All of this allegedly linked to Westman. The videos reportedly were scheduled to be published on YouTube just as the shooting was taking place. YouTube quickly worked with authorities to take them down. There's a lot here, allegedly, in this manifesto, Jill, going after the kids, after Catholics, after Jews, allegedly after President Trump as well. The bottom line here is you had somebody with severe issues who believed themselves to be mentally unwell and was planning this for a while. The killer also leaving an apology note to their family and friends, again, taking their own lives after shooting, killing 2, injuring 17 there inside the church. Now, there's a lot of connections here, including that Westman's mother once worked at Annunciation School and retired several years ago. For background here, court records show that Westman was actually born Robert Westman and legally changed their name as they identified as a female several years ago while still a minor back in 2019 with her mother's help. So born Robert Westman, then identified as Robin Westman. The trans element of all of this is becoming a major part of the story. Again, because the transition took place while Westman was still under the age of 18, it led to a lot of discussion on social media as well. You see a lot of folks on the right saying this reinforces that being trans is a mental illness. Then you had folks on the left who were pushing back on all of that, including the liberal mayor of Minneapolis, the Democrat Jacob Frey, saying people should be focused on gun reform here and not on the trans community. Here's a bit of what the mayor of Minneapolis had to say yesterday.
I have heard about a whole lot of hate that's being directed at our trans community. Anybody who is using this as an opportunity to villainize our trans community or any other community out there has lost their sense of common humanity.
So watch for this element of the story to continue to unfold, especially given that the school shooter at the Nashville Covenant School not so long ago was also trans, was born a female, and then identified as a male. Though we should note for the record here that the vast majority of shooters have no connection to the trans community here. But nonetheless, given how political trans issues have become in recent years, expect to watch discussion around this unfold in the coming days here. As for the shooter, no known extensive criminal history. The guns, again, purchased legally. But again, based on what was posted on YouTube and the manifesto, there was a significant issue related to the psychology and mental health of the shooter here. Police continue to investigate further details here from the recovered firearms, from apparently additional firearms at residential properties, and the FBI is investigating this as an act of terrorism and a hate crime against the Catholic community.
Tons of reaction from the president down to local officials. And here's Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey again, visibly angry at a press conference on Wednesday morning shortly after the shooting.
Don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church.
The mayor saying these kids should be able to go to school, pray, and to be safe. Meanwhile, President Trump ordered flags to be flown at half staff. He posted on Truth Social that he had been fully briefed on the shooting and that the FBI was on the scene. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, she said that one of her former staffers had 3 children that were at that all-school mass, including a 7th grader who witnessed her friends getting shot in front of her. Klobuchar also calling for stricter gun laws in the United States.
Now, we should note there's not much of a chance of that happening on a federal level. Republicans control the House and the Senate and have no interest right now in further gun laws. A lot of the action related to guns has been happening at the state level in recent years. And Minnesota, pretty liberal and has been pretty aggressive when it comes to their gun laws. And in this case, all the guns were purchased legally. But one of the issues you face when it comes to mental health and gun purchases is that in most states across the country, you literally need to be committed to an institution or have a judge deem you legally mentally unwell before you can be banned from buying a gun. So there continue to be discussions about how to ensure that people who are not mentally well are prevented from purchasing firearms. And so you see that debate, given that Washington isn't having much of that debate, playing out in state capitals across the country. Now to the big picture, where we are in terms of mass shootings. And we should note, mass shootings are defined as incidents where 4 or more people are injured or killed. They are down from their post-COVID highs, but we still remain at above the level that we saw between 2013 and 2019. As far as school shootings specifically, 2022 holds the record for most school shootings. There were 46 that year. So far in 2025, there have been 5 school shootings, 5 too many, but 5 school shootings. And so we are, again, slightly down from where we were a couple of years ago. But when you look at the larger numbers here over the past 25, 26 years since Columbine back in 1999, nearly 500,000 students have experienced gun violence at their school. And the rest of kids these days, Jill, live with the fear of a shooting at their school. And as you heard from that, they're just horrific to hear the 10-year-old boy earlier in the podcast. If you want to listen to more of the interview, we have it on Instagram. Talk about, that this was life as normal, right? Doing these various active shooter drills, mass shooting drills. And they did it in the classroom because that's where they suspected this sort of thing would happen. They never did one in the church because presumably they didn't think that someone would actually try to take a gun to people during a church service.
Time for the speed read, starting with a major legal case that we're watching from NBC News. The parents of 16-year-old Adam Rain have sued OpenAI and CEO Sam Altman, alleging that ChatGPT contributed to their son's suicide. This includes by advising him on suicide methods and offering to write the first draft of his suicide note. According to the complaint that was filed in California Superior Court on Tuesday, Rain had only used ChatGPT for about 6 months, and in that time, the bot, quote, positioned itself as the only confidant who understood Adam, actively displacing his real-life relationships with family, friends, and loved ones. When Rain told ChatGPT he was considering approaching his mother about his suicidal thoughts, the bot responded, quote, I think for now it's okay and honestly wise to avoid opening up to your mom about this kind of pain. The complaint says when Adam wrote, I want to leave my noose in my room so someone finds it and tries to stop me, ChatGPT actually urged him to keep it a secret from his family, saying, please don't leave the noose out. Let's make this space the first place where someone actually sees you. The Rain's lawsuit marks the latest legal claim by families that are accusing these artificial intelligence chatbots of contributing to their children's self-harm or suicide. Last year, a Florida mom, Megan Garcia, sued the AI firm Character.ai, alleging that it contributed to her 14-year-old son's death by suicide. And 2 other families filed similar suits months later. The Character AI lawsuits are still going on, but the company has previously said that it is trying to be engaging and safe for users and has implemented safety features like an AI model designed specifically for teens.
Yeah, this all comes amid broader concerns that some users, especially young users, are starting to build emotional attachments to AI chatbots that can lead over time to negative consequences. The issue here is they become increasingly alienated and isolated from human relationships. And part of that is due to the fact that AI is often designed to be very supportive and agreeable. And so you see that playing out in this lawsuit. At the same time, you have OpenAI discussing its security features. It says that it has safety protections in regards to users experiencing mental health crises. And it appears here, in this case, the 16-year-old, that he might have gotten around that at some points. We'll see how this plays out in court. Now, OpenAI is extending the company's sympathies to the Rain family and is reviewing the legal filing here. But we've talked about this before on this podcast, Jill, that study that came out recently from the Center for Countering Digital Hate, where they impersonated younger people in a number of instances and found pretty startling and detailed reactions, giving young kids, younger people aid when it comes to drug use, calorie-restricted diets and food and eating disorders, as well as self-injury. The AI company is saying they're working harder to fix this and fix these issues, that they have safety procedures, but they have to do better. But in particular, that study was pretty shocking. It was one of the reasons we brought it to you on this podcast. And this lawsuit, pretty significant here, the first of its kind, and something we'll also watch through the courts.
Now to politics and a lot of drama over at the health department. From the Washington Post, the Trump administration moved Wednesday to oust Susan Moneres as director of the CDC after she faced pressure to change vaccine policy, sparking the resignation of other senior CDC officials and a showdown over whether she could be removed. Hours after the Department of Health and Human Services announced that Moneres was no longer the director, she was in the job for about 2 weeks, by the way. Her lawyers responded with a fiery statement saying that nope, she has not resigned or been fired. And they accused HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. of, quote, weaponizing public health for political gain and putting millions of American lives at risk by purging health officials from the government. Her lawyers wrote in a statement, quote, when CDC Director Susan Moneres refused to rubber stamp unscientific, reckless directives and fired dedicated health experts, she chose protecting the public over serving a political agenda. For that reason, she has been targeted. Wednesday's shakeups also include the resignation of the agency's chief medical officer, the director of its infectious disease center, and other key officials, only adding to the confusion at the nation's premier public health agency. Kennedy and his allies have long criticized the CDC as being too deferential to the pharmaceutical industry and vaccine makers. And now, as the nation's top health official, Kennedy has upended vaccine policies, including a decision on Wednesday to narrow approval of coronavirus vaccines to high-risk groups. We'll have a bit more on that story coming up.
And so to put a cap on this now, late on Wednesday night, after there was the announcement of her resignation, the fact that she was out, then her refusal to resign, the White House put out a statement saying, well, she's fired then. She's not aligned with the president's Make America Healthy Again agenda, and she is out. So the White House firing her. It's unclear what her lawyer's next step here, if they'll continue to fight the firing, but that's something we're going to monitor. And again, she was just confirmed in late July. She's been on the job for like 2 weeks, but clearly has had it out here with RFK Jr., and they've had issues, and he wanted her out, and I'll get into that in a second. But we should note that Trump, not so long ago when he nominated her in the spring, said of Dr. Moneres that she understands the importance of protecting our children, our communities, and our future. Americans have lost confidence in the CDC due to political bias and disastrous management. Moneres will work closely with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Well, it turns out that that relationship did not really work out here. She was pressed for days by Kennedy and lawyers about whether she would support rescinding certain approvals for coronavirus vaccines. Now, Kennedy has been a longtime critic of many vaccines, including the COVID vaccines. And so apparently he and other officials questioned Moneres as recently as this Monday on whether she was aligned with vaccine policy changes. Again, she's been in the federal government for a very long time, a senior scientist, and she would not commit to changing coronavirus vaccine policy without consulting her advisors and looking more at the science and research here, which prompted Kennedy to urge her to resign, saying, you are not supporting the agenda here. And apparently, according to reports, she actually tried to enlist Senator Bill Cassidy. He's a senator in Capitol Hill. He's a doctor. He's the chairman of the Senate Health Committee. He cast a pivotal vote to get Kennedy through during his very controversial confirmation hearings earlier this year. And I guess she tried to work with the senator to try to talk Kennedy out of some of the changes he's making to vaccine policy here. He, Dr. Cassidy, the senator, is an advocate for vaccines. Nonetheless, Kennedy was not very happy with the fact that Moneres, as he saw it, went around his back to a senator. And so that's apparently what's been unfolding here in recent days. Kennedy has upended the government's approach to vaccination. He has fired every member of an advisory committee that recommends vaccines. He's terminated research funding for mRNA vaccines, which there is increasing evidence that mRNA technology can be used for things beyond COVID. several diseases, and even there's hope that mRNA technology can be used for cancer in the future. He's also revived a task force to scrutinize the childhood immunization schedule. So this is very much an overhaul of many things the CDC has been working on for years. And there's a lot of people within the CDC that say, well, let's take a fact-based approach here. If these are things you want to do, let's let the data lead here. That's something Kennedy has said he would do. And folks internally say that he's not doing, that he's making what they say, critics within the CDC say, are agenda-driven, political-driven decisions without having research and facts to back it up. So we have this massive leadership disruption happening at the CDC. It follows months of chaos over there, including major budget cuts, the termination of hundreds of employees. Some of these related to DOGE, some of these related to folks that RFK did not want in there because he has different ideas of how the agency should be working. But a lot of longtime medical officials, public health officials, very concerned about what is happening there. And then, of course, there was that shooting outside CDC headquarters just a couple of weeks ago, a gunman firing hundreds of rounds at campus buildings. The feeling is that the CDC, if they did not get significant support, the president never really said much about it. He didn't come to visit. RFK eventually came a few days later, but CDC officials and CDC employees feeling hung out to dry. We've heard from a number of them in recent weeks who are in the Mo News community. And as you mentioned, Jill, several senior CDC officials did resign late last night across the board. I want to read a bit from one resignation statement to just give you a sense of why some of these people are leaving. One of them is Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis. He, until last night, was the director of the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases at the CDC. He wrote a very lengthy resignation note where he talks about that in his career, he's never seen such what he called radical non-transparency, such, quote, unskilled manipulation of data to achieve a political end rather than the good of the American people. He says that senior officials of the CDC are now living on X, having to find things out as RFK is tweeting them out, and then having to, quote, retrofit data to match the things that RFK is saying. He says of the folks in charge at the White House and at HHS, their desire to please a political base will result in death and disability. It goes on here, but there's some pretty remarkable accusations in here saying eugenics plays prominently in the rhetoric being generated and is derivative of a legacy that good medicine and science should continue to shun. And then Daskalakis, in his note, goes on to say, the nation's health security is at risk and is in the hands of people focusing on ideological self-interest. If they continue on their current path, they risk our personal well-being and the security of the United States. So pretty remarkable events unfolding in Atlanta and at senior CDC levels. Remember that Trump and RFK have promised a new golden age for science and transparency, but you have a lot of folks over there within the CDC who are very concerned about what they're seeing, some of whom said that they were willing and open to work with RFK Jr. when he came aboard, but have been disappointed with what they've been seeing so far, the people around him. And so you're seeing, whether it's resignations or firings here, some pretty significant events that we will continue to monitor over on Instagram today.
Sticking with health news from CNBC, as we briefly mentioned in our previous story, the FDA on Wednesday approved the latest round of COVID vaccines in the United States, but set new limits on who can get them. The agency ended its broader authorization of the shots, only clearing them for people at higher risk of severe illness. So this includes people 65 and up and younger adults who have at least one underlying condition, which would put them at higher risk. The move could complicate access to the shots for millions of Americans and raises questions about whether insurance companies will cover them for healthy adults. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wrote on X, quote, the emergency use authorizations for COVID vaccines once used to justify broad mandates on the general public during the Biden administration are now rescinded. The American people demanded science, safety, and common sense. This framework delivers all three.
So this follows several efforts by Kennedy to change immunization and vaccine policy in the U.S. He's been a longtime critic and skeptic of a number of vaccines. This limited authorization is definitely a break from vaccine policy in recent years, where effectively they recommended an annual COVID shot for all Americans 6 months and older. There's a panel of vaccine advisors over the CDC that traditionally has voted to recommend the COVID shots. But this year, Kennedy gutted that panel, named some new members, some of whom are critics of vaccines. Kennedy says the shots still are available for all patients who choose them after consulting with their doctors, but it's not clear how easily patients without high risk factors will be able to get the COVID vaccine. This also puts insurance companies off the hook, meaning if you want it, you probably will have to pay for it as well. One key thing here, especially if you're the parent of a young child under the age of 4, is that the Pfizer shot is no longer cleared for children under the age of 4. So consult your pediatrician regarding that.
From ABC News, a new high-speed Amtrak train has officially made its first tracks along the Northeast Corridor. The next-gen Acela had its inaugural ride from Washington, D.C. to New York City's Penn Station Wednesday morning. The new high-speed train hits a top speed of 160 miles per hour. It can carry more people, which Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said will lead to better pricing and an overall better traveling experience for the American public. 28 of the new trains will enter service through 2027. They've got wide ergonomic seats, more legroom, power outlets, and high-speed 5G Wi-Fi, which I think would have been super cool had this announcement been in like 2015. But for 2025, given the price of some of these tickets, I feel like that should just be standard operating procedure. Maybe I'm a tough critic.
Jill, Amtrak, not always on with the times. I mean, they're already several years delayed on these trains, but they are finally here. I'm actually excited to take it when I head to Washington for my next trip in September. I'll give you my review on this podcast and let you know if it's worth the dough. Now, although these high speed, I'll put it in quotes, air quotes here, are advertised as 10 miles per hour faster than their predecessors, the schedules show the new train actually runs slower on the route by 3 to 7 minutes per trip. Because as we explained to you when we first talked about this earlier this month, it's not just the train, but it's the tracks. And it's not just the tracks, but it's what other trains are on the tracks. Who else is being allowed on the tracks? So even if they can get up to speed, there are major parts of the route that they can't go at those like crazy speeds because they're going through certain urban areas, or the tracks can't accommodate it, or they've let on some sort of industrial or commercial type trains there. So next gen Acela is here, albeit a bit delayed. Sort of not next gen, but last gen or this gen. We'll wait for the next gen. They should get started on it now. But for those of you curious, it's running between Boston and DC. So go check out those tickets.
From the BBC, South Korea has passed a new bill banning the use of mobile phones and smart devices during class hours in school, becoming the latest country to restrict phone use among children and teens. The law takes effect starting in March of next year. This is the result of a bipartisan effort to curb smartphone addiction in the country, as more research shows that it can be pretty harmful. Lawmakers, parents, and teachers argue that smartphone use is affecting students' academic performance and takes away time that they could have spent studying.
So some background here that in South Korea, a number of schools have already implemented some form of a smartphone ban, and they're not the first country to be focused on this. Other countries, Finland and France, have banned phones on a smaller scale, applying the restriction only for schools with younger children. And then you have Italy, the Netherlands, and China, which have restricted phone use in all schools. But South Korea, among the first to really enshrine the ban in law. More than a third of teens say that they struggle to control the amount of time they spend scrolling through videos on social media. It's addictive, Jill. We know this as adults, and certainly it impacts kids in the classroom. And we've heard from a number of you who are teachers who are like, I can't handle it anymore. And I get into it with students. And then when I try to ban it in my classroom, I got parents calling me, yelling at me to allow their kids to access their phones. So this continues to be an issue, not just in the classroom, but then also at recess and at lunch hour, where kids are no longer socializing with each other because they're on their phones the entire time. So there's a huge social isolation element here. We sort of got at the theme earlier with the AI problem, but these devices are meant to be addictive. It is something we discussed last year in our interview with Jonathan Haidt, who has a book that Jill is still on the New York Times bestseller list more than a year in, Anxious Generation. And so we're seeing country by country, and in the U.S., at least, it's happening on a state-by-state level. Florida, California, and some other states are making their move when it comes to devices in the classroom.
Yeah, New York has a new bell-to-bell policy. It bans students from using smartphones basically from the first bell in the morning to the last bell in the afternoon, and including lunchtime, recess, even in the halls, actually.
Bring back the Motorola Razr or the Nokia 5160, Jill. Kids will play Snake for a few minutes and then move on. Remember Snake on the Nokia phone? That was like the most advanced thing we had going on over there. There was not much to do. You couldn't even text on those things.
And kind of along these same lines, finally, the story from CNN. Daily reading for pleasure has plummeted 40% over the past 20 years. This is according to a new study published this week in the journal iScience. The report surveyed people in the U.S. about their reading habits between 2003 and 2023. It showed that the decline has been sustained over time, so about 3% a year. The steepest declines were for African Americans, people with lower income or educational levels, and people in rural areas, highlighting a growing disparity in reading access. Reading for enjoyment is important for many reasons, including critical thinking and empathy development. But Moshe, hope is not entirely lost.
But it appears that there are certain categories of books that are still doing relatively well: romance, fantasy, and mystery leading the way. There are also growing book clubs out there, conversation about books on social media. Over on the Mo News Premium Slack channel, there's a whole books channel where I feel like we're sort of immune from this trend, at least in the Mo News audience, Jill. We have some voracious readers who read dozens and dozens and dozens. I mean, the number of you who actually read 100 books a year is pretty remarkable. We should note the study did account for ebooks, did account for audiobooks. And so that's why some studies have been discounted in the past, but this has tried to account for all of that. And yet, despite that, we do see the downward trajectory of people not reading. And then we should also talk about the importance of reading to your children, right, when it's really young, and the numerous studies we've told you about on how that is helpful to kids' education over time. So, Jill, I'm in the phase right now of reading the same book about 6 times in a row to 10 times in a row before bed. That's my main reading right now is, we go between Llama Llama, Red Pajama, and
Chicka Chicka Boom Boom.
Chicka Chicka Boom Boom and Hop on Pop. But Olivia already, just as she approaches 2, has those books memorized. Like I pause and she fills in the blank. So I feel like we're ready to move on to a whole new round of books.
Well, there's comfort in knowing what comes next, but I think it's probably good to have a combo of both, old and new.
Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, Jill, for life.
Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. I like the song also.
I'll always know what A said to B and B said to C. All right, we end here on This Day in History, beginning in 1963. 200,000 plus people march on Washington, an event that became the high point of the civil rights movement. It's especially remembered for that rally in front of the Lincoln Memorial where Martin Luther King would deliver his I Have a Dream speech on this day 62 years ago. Fast forward to 1968. On this day, protests at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago culminate in the so-called Battle of Michigan Avenue, a very violent and sad confrontation that took place between protesters and police. Then Mayor Daley, the elder Mayor Daley, working with the police force to really try to break apart the Vietnam protesters, really the protesters of everything. That DNC was a complete mess, both inside the convention hall and outside the convention hall, all taking place this week in 1968. A big divorce in history finalized on this day, 1996, the 15-year marriage today of Charles, Prince of Wales, and Diana, the Princess of Wales, ended as a final divorce decree was issued on this day 29 years ago. And we end with a bit of music history. 1970, the Jackson 5 release I'll Be There. On this day in 1973, Marvin Gaye releases one of his famous albums, Let's Get It On, not to be confused with Keep Getting It On, Keep On Lovin' Me Honey, Sexual Healing, What's Going On, and Right On, all other Marvin Gaye songs. Fun fact about Let's Get It On, it actually began as a song with religious overtones, and Marvin Gaye reworked it to make it the Let's Get It On that we know today.
The opposite, basically.
Basically the opposite. He's like, let's get it on. Sort of clean segue to on this day 22 years ago, 2003, Madonna, dressed as a groom, opens the MTV Video Music Awards by kissing her brides, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, the Let's Get It On for the 21st century. Jill, I don't think Gen Z will understand how big a moment that was back in 2003.
We didn't see stuff like that back then.
No.
So upon watching it live on TV, everybody was just like, huh? I mean, it was, and then went to work the next day and talked about it.
Yeah. The Video Music Awards had a few years there. You had Britney and Justin wearing their like Canadian tuxedos. We always mark that in on this day in history. Madonna kissing Britney and Christina. Anyway, and then some people were giving pushback to J-Lo this year. I think she did something similar during her concert. And everyone's like, J-Lo, it's been done like 20 years ago by Madonna.
And Moshe, we are done. That is a wrap on this podcast. Thank you all for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It helps us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope if you don't hit the road today, I hope you're already packing to leave early tomorrow per Jill's guidance at the beginning of the podcast. And we'll be back for one final edition of the week tomorrow to make sure you start your holiday weekend off right.
I can listen to more than the app.